buying a home in King Colony, you're going to want to stick around because today we're talking about the 50% rule. And today I'm going to have a special guest. See you soon. Welcome back. I've got my husband and real estate partner with me, Tom.
Hello.
He's going to help explain the 50% rule to you guys. He's a certified building official, a general contractor, plans examiner. He's got all these licenses, so he's a perfect resource for this type of conversation. Tom, so just give us a real general idea about what the 50% rule is and how it affects owners in Key Colony Beach.
Sure. Well, the 50% rule is mandated by the federal government. To get the NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program, to get insurance for your community, you have to adopt an ordinance, which includes the 50% rule. Each town does something a little different, but Key Colony Beach has adopted it. And it includes that if a hurricane happens, if the structure itself is more damaged than 50%, then you have to tear that structure down and rebuild it and make sure it's above flood. Most of the homes in Key Colony Beach are below flood. There are some new ones, of course, that are on stilts or they filled the grade and they're higher than flood. They don't have that problem. But if they are below flood, then they have to meet the 50% rule. And that only includes the structure itself, which means, say, some of those homes are worth like 1.5 million, and unfortunately, you can't include the land. It's just the structure. The structure might only be worth, through the assessors, only $300,000. So it means you only got $150,000 to basically rebuild that structure. And if it's going to cost you more than $150,000, then you can't rebuild it, and you have to actually tear it down and build it above flood.
So what you're saying is that it only applies to the building value.
Yes.
Right. Not like a pool or landscaping or any of that.
No, only the building value itself. And you can't, say if you had free labor, they don't consider that in the calculations. So you would have to do it at the market rate labor. Say if you got free lumber for the new, to rebuild it, or free drywall or any of that stuff, it doesn't matter. It has to be the market rate. So you actually have to have a general contractor give you a quote stating how much is going to be rebuilt, even if you're rebuilding it yourself.
So if my house's building value is like $500,000, you're telling me I only have like $250,000 to get it back to where it was?
Yes, and if you can't prove to the city / the building official, which is usually the one that runs that program through the NFIP. They usually want a certified floodplain manager, and usually the building official takes care of that. And you have to prove to him that, it meets the 50% rule. And sometimes it's difficult with construction costs, inflation, and everything else, and paying a contractor. So that does become a problem. And if you can't prove it, then you have to tear the building down and rebuild.
And after Irma, a lot of people were, getting their properties reappraised, trying to make the value more so they could, fit into that 50% rule, so they didn't have to demo the property. Do you think owners can still do that today?
Yeah, usually they use the assessor's appraised value of the structure. You can't pay a licensed appraiser to come out and give his evaluation before the storm, how much the structure was worth. And then you could use that and try to meet the 50% rule. But there is one other problem is they have a 3-year limitation. So if you had 2 hurricanes in a 3-year period, most likely the building would have to be torn down. There is something in their ordinance which is a little confusing. In one of their sections, it talks about a 10-year period and 25%. I'm assuming that what they mean is if you had 2 hurricanes in a 10-year period, and your first hurricane, the valuation was more than 25%, but less than the 50%, you have to include that in the next evaluation in that 10-year period if it's more than 25%. which then it would have to be torn down. The ordinance is poorly written, that section, but that's what I'm referring to. So the 3-year period is sort of a wash. It really is, if you have 2 hurricanes in a 10-year period, you're most likely going to have to tear that building down and rebuild it above flood.
All right, so the flood maps are also changing, Tom. So how's that going to affect the homes in Key Colony?
Well, the flood map, so the changes are going to have different elevations. Also for flood elevations, also the 0 point where you measure. So surveyors need a point to measure from. Say, sea level at 0. That has changed. So in 1929, they used a 0 point that everybody was aware of. Now in 88, it's changed and they're adopting that one, the new datum. And that basically 0 point is dropped 1'4", which means, say if I had a survey that was just done 2 years ago, and my elevation of my property was 5'4" above sea level. Well, so if somebody resurveyed it today, it would actually be 4 feet above sea level, which means I just dropped 1'4". And say the elevation of my flood elevation was, say, 5 feet, I was 4 inches above the flood. But today, if it was still the same 5 feet elevation, it would not. It would be dropped at 1'4", so you'd be 4 feet. So you'd actually be down a foot below flood. So it gets a little confusing. So basically, the old surveys that you have are outdated. They're off by 1'4", basically. So if you have 5'4" in your elevation, you're really at 4 feet. So now also what happened is, in the new flood maps, is they changed numbers. So if you're an elevation 8, maybe it's an elevation 9, you would have to look at the map. So that's an extra foot plus the 1'4". So it's really an extra 2 foot 4 inches, which makes a big difference. So most of the homes in Key Colony Beach are below flood anyways, but some of them are only a couple inches above flood. Now for sure, all the homes will be below flood, the ground level homes, of course, not the silted homes. But so that becomes a big problem. There's some new construction homes, which these people aren't thinking. A good example on 14th Street. There's new construction was built 2 years ago. That on the new map will be under flood. His first floor area, which today is above flood, the new map, his house will be below flood, which is crazy if you think about it.
So if my house says right now I'm at elevation AE8, and then in the new map comes out, I'm still at an AE8, I'm down 1.5 feet. Is that what you're saying?
No, the 0 point's down 1.5 feet. So basically that AE8 is really AE 9.4 on the old map.
On the old map.
Yeah, so that elevation is, your ground level just dropped 1'4", basically. So that elevation would be like an AE 9.4 to be exact.
Okay. So in some parts of Key Colony, we saw that they're going from AE to VE. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens if my home's substantially damaged and it wasn't an AE, but now it's in a VE, and I have to rebuild? What does that mean as a VE? What does that mean?
VE structurally, the home is built differently. It's supposed to withstand the wave action, basically, and that first force of waves that come in. So usually, you could build say if you wanted to build a modular, which they don't allow in Key Colony, but say if there was a modular and you have the columns, those columns are usually just sitting on a pile that somebody either drove in or dug and did precast, or they poured a concrete rebar in it. There's different ways to do it into the caprock, but they're not connected on the bottom like a checkerboard. And usually a VE home, they're connected. So you see those columns that coming out of the ground, and you don't really see anything else, maybe a concrete slab, but they're actually connected by a grade beam. So that's connecting all of them. That structurally holds it stronger for the wave action when they do hit, the water hits those columns. They stay together. It's a lot stronger structure, which costs more money, unfortunately. So it's cost more money to build in a VE zone.
So that's what I would have to do. I have to put those the beam.
Well, the columns would have to be structurally connected. There's different ways you can engineer stuff, but 95% of the time you're going to structurally, the columns in the bottom that coming off from the ground would have to be connected to each other. Not only do they go to the caprock, but they have to be connected to each other when they're on the ground with a grade beam.
So the new maps also bring in a coastal A zone, which FEMA is recommending that they be built, that those properties be built to VE.
Yeah, the code actually requires that. The International Residential Code does talk about the coastal A zones. Coastal A zones are built the same way as the coastal VE zone. So if you have a VE zone, it's the same thing as building in a coastal A zone. So it's structurally the same. It's just another way, unfortunately, that FEMA wants to make sure these homes are structurally stronger. In the Florida Keys, you really don't have too much of a problem. It's in other coastal areas that you have when they still allow stick-built. South Carolina and certain areas where they still use basically wood structures and wood columns, like 6x6 columns coming out of the ground, 10 feet off the ground, and they're holding a structure, which is not as strong, that's for sure.
So how does this relate back to the the 50% rule? When the new maps come out, you just said that like all of those like new construction, that brand new home on 14th Street is going to be below flood. So are they going to have to follow the 50% rule now?
Yeah. So if that does get flooded, they'll have to follow the 50% rule. They might be fine. I mean, it's a 2-story building over there. And the value on that one, I'm sure, is a little higher than most houses because it's a new construction. But still, they have to follow the 50% rule. They could get flooded. I mean, that's the whole thing. It could be a problem.
All right, so I think that's all we have about the 50% rule today. Just a general overview. I know it gets complicated, it can be a bit confusing, but we're going to put some articles and some links to the code actually below so you can read about it, and feel free to call us, reach out to us if you have more questions about the 50% rule and buying Colony Beach.